All right, we are live. Almost live on Substack. Very good. Great morning, world. Great morning, humans. This is your boy, Dr. JC Dornick, and welcome to another edition of the Make Sense with Dr. JC podcast. This is our live edition coming to you at 8 a.m. every Monday morning. And we are streaming live right now. I see people joining us, Florence Acosta, Kat, people joining us on Substack. And we also have some folks starting to join us on YouTube. And why do I do these lives as we get ready? And by the way, we're going to stay on the Substack platform. So if you can hear me on the Substack platform, because we're using a different mic system for it, just chime in and say, I can hear you. Do me a favor, because we're doing this live and I want to make sure that I know that all my gear here is all set up, but I just want to make sure that it's coming through Substack live. So if you're watching on Substack, just give me a comment and I'll be able to see it. And likewise, if you're watching on YouTube, you can chime in there as well. Let's see what we got on YouTube. Okay, good morning. I can hear you. Thank you, Kat. Thank you, Kat. So feel free to share this around. Florence says she can hear me as well. When I see that name, Florence Acosta, I think of Florence and the Machine, one of my favorite artists. I just love Florence and the Machine. Awesome. So we're going to get started here in a second, but I just want to touch on something. I guess this comes from a place of gratitude. My partner, Julie Loken, and we started a new company called Dragonfly Creations. And instead of an A, it has an 8. But what we're doing is teaching people how to podcast and things like that. Great band. Yeah, she's great live, Florence. So in any case, we're teaching fledgling podcast curious people. There we go. I see that YouTube coming in. Great morning, Lori. How to start podcasts from A to Z, and also how to make money podcasting and things like that. So some of those people in that freshman class are going to be listening today because this is a different concept of doing it live. But what I was explaining, and I guess the reason why I'm explaining this to you right now is that in your own way, you could do this if you are like me. This act of coming here live to you is really therapy. So that comes from a place of gratitude. Yes, the content I created is going to be for you, but it's also for me as well. For those of you that got my book, Make Sense, How to Rewire Your Mind and Transform Your Life, which is crazy to think that I have a book on my own shelf, my own book on my own shelf, but you'll learn my story and the whole concept of the entire Make Sense ecosystem, the book, the podcast, the Make Sense Academy, all the things that I do never started with the intention of delivering something for everybody else. They were for my own self-healing. The idea of starting a podcast, writing your words down, doing something live right now came from this just years and years of battling anxiety. And what was my anxiety triggered by? Public speaking. So I took the path, least traveled, the path of most resistance in many cases. And I decided to fight it. And coming to you live like this, I always like to say that it never gets easy, but it gets easier. I do this all the time. So the reason why I'm sharing that with you today is there's probably something that triggers you and gets you anxious or gets you worried and concerned. And there's ways of kind of doing a little bit of voluntary exposure to it. And that's the way all this started off. And here I am now with my podcast being one of the top 5 ranked podcasts in the world. All these hundreds of thousands of people listening per month. So the reason why I come to you live here today is I want you to see it raw. I want to be able to interact with you. And if you have any questions about the topic that we're going to discuss today, feel free to ask them. I don't expect everybody to just say good things. If you want to dispute things and come at me and all that stuff, that's great. It might even make the cut because this podcast will be cleaned up and published on YouTube and also Substack, right? But also on the podcast platform for hundreds of thousands of people to see. And if some of our interaction is delightful or insightful, those rhyme, they'll make it to the cut. So, anyway, I just wanted to share with you today how grateful I am to have this opportunity to come to you today. Clubhouse name of the room. Clubhouse name of the room. Is that a question? Or, oh, Clubhouse has name of the room. Not sure what you mean by that. So you can maybe Alexei Zaitsev. So today's topic is one that is very, very connected to everything that I'm saying. And the purpose of these Mondays, now that you know kind of selfishly what it's for, is just to give you an opportunity to do what most people will not do today. Most people are going to wake up and allow their program to dictate their day. They're going to let their day dictate their day. And we'll get into that. And that's not a great way to live. That's a reactive way to live. And if you learn from what we speak about in the Make Sense, the book that we just published, you know, the way we look at things and the way we react to things, you know, has been, for the most part, programmed and persuaded and conditioned into our minds our whole life. So if we're just handing the keys of trust over to our automatic reaction stress response system, rather than taking control as the dominant force and shot caller of our day, well, you probably can predict what kind of results you're going to get. So Kat says, I love that. Kat says, I choose what I get my energy to. So I would assume what you're saying is that you dictate and choose what you're going to devote your energy to. We don't know the topic. Right, Alexei, you don't know the topic yet. So we're going to announce that right now. Now I understand what you said. So that's the process of making sense, by the way. You know, I don't know about you, but when I don't understand something, I start asking questions until I go, aha, now I understand. Okay, so for Alexei, for everybody else that's tuning in, great morning, great morning, humans, great morning, world. So much gratitude. Once again, my name's Dr. JC Dornick. I go by The Dragon. That's my podcast hosting handle, as if I was like a truck driver or something. And it's just such a pleasure to be with you today. Today's topic is called Stop Managing Time and Start Managing This Instead. So we're going to go over something that we call the night before rule. And we're going to talk about claiming authority over your mood. We're going to talk about mood management today. And God, I just owe so much of my life. I might even tell you that I owe just being here in general to my ability throughout the years to get better and better, never perfect, at managing my mood. So here's what this is going to be about today. We're going to talk about stopping the idea of letting our environment dictate our results. We spoke a little bit about that in the beginning. We're going to learn how to claim authority over our mental state and build, from my book, an interface response system that actually works. We're going to talk a lot about how we can teach so many tools. We can help so many people learn tools and strategies, but that doesn't mean they'll be able to follow through and do it. So we're going to talk about why today. So in this episode, I'm going to explain why productivity is not always a time management problem. We get very enveloped in time blocking and time management. It's actually a state management problem, or I should say it might be. It could also be. So we're going to unpack how the night before rule, which I'll teach you, determines whether you wake up reactive or intentional. So park that for a second and just decide, have you decided to be reactive or intentional this day? Or have you already begun the process of being reactive? Or did you make a decision to be intentional? But what is your stance right now? And we're going to talk about why borrowing happiness from tomorrow sabotages our success, and how mastering your internal environment makes you truly unfuckwithable in 2026. That's one of my chapters. I have a chapter in my book about becoming unfuckwithable. And that is about having agility. That's about resilience. That's about perseverance. But what it's mostly about is setting yourself up for that state. Because when you decide to be unfuckwithable, it doesn't mean that the fucking is going to stop, right? It just means that you're deciding what it's going to mean to you, which is the only thing that you have a decision in. So you can have the best strategy in the world. We spoke about this. You could have the best business plan, the best productivity system, the best calendar structure. But if you wake up reactive, I'm going to teach you how to stop doing that, tired, emotionally scattered, and already behind the starting line, that strategy means nothing. It becomes almost worthless. I always say that learning and knowing is nothing more than a distraction in the absence of action. So if we decide that we're going to like do something because we learned it at a seminar or a podcast or we read a book and we don't follow through, it's typically not that you can't do it. It's that you didn't work on the who first. It's who you are that determines how well what you do works. So the problem is your state very often, or your mood. If you peel it back, that's the precursor. So today we're going to go deep, and we're going to go deeper than your typical productivity hacks. So if you're looking for productivity hacks, you'll get a couple today, but we're going to go deeper. We're going to peel it back a little bit further and work on the thing that is really, really predicating your ability to do it. So we're talking about internal environment authority here today. The discipline of managing your mental state before the noisy world starts influencing it. So we're going to talk about some morning routine, but also evening routine, because here's the real takeaway today, everybody. And this represents one of the major tenets in the Make Sense ecosystem, and that is this. This is probably one of the most valuable lessons I have ever learned, and I'm paying it forward to you. Great morning to Margaret and John Shields, who has joined us. And let's just say hi to some folks in YouTube. Great to see you. Looks like we're starting to get some interaction there. So here's one of the most important things that I've ever learned, and one of two tenets of the Make Sense ecosystem. Who you are determines how well what you do works. And if you stay with me until the end of this episode, I'm going to share with you what I call the night before rule. And that's just a simple, powerful shift that ensures you stop borrowing happiness from tomorrow. Stop borrowing happiness from tomorrow and leading your day with intention. Now, I just want to park it on the side for anybody that's joining us from our new Dragonfly Flight Academy, our podcasting school. And by the way, if you're podcast curious or you have a podcast that you want to learn how to, expand, grow, and monetize, just reach out to us and check out our academy. It's just an amazing opportunity. But what I've just done is lay the fabric and the foundation for this episode today, right? So what's cool is if you guys follow the Make Sense with Dr. JC podcast, you're hearing it live and raw today, because I'm also fishing to see if there's anything that happens organically. But this episode will be probably like a 30-40 minute tops episode, because we're going to have a Q&A after this as well, if you guys want to hang out. So most people believe that their mood is something that simply happens to them. Isn't that an interesting thing? They wake up in the morning and they say things like, I'm just not feeling it today. I'm not feeling good today. I didn't sleep well last night. You know what? I didn't sleep well last night, but I didn't use that as a platform this morning. Sometimes people say today's already off, but here's the truth, that high performers eventually learn. And when I say high performers, I'm not separating you from other people when I say that. That's an important distinction right there. A high performer is just somebody that's learned how to become unfuckwithable and set up their mood and manage their mood. So don't ever think that you're separated from the potential of being a high performer. There's a high performer version of you. So when I say high performers have eventually learned that mood is not a condition. Now that's pretty controversial to say mood is not a condition, because when you're in a bad mood, don't you kind of feel like it's a condition? It's actually a managed state. And that means that you have a say in your mood. So the next time you find yourself in a good mood or a bad mood, just contemplate and entertain the fact that you had a say in that. And that in turn means that your day is up to you. So Hal Elrod was really the pioneer of the morning. He wrote a book called The Miracle Morning, which I read, and that played a big role in me coming up with what I call my great morning rise up. And, he just said, win the morning, win the day. And that's what he meant by it. It's up to you. You have a say. So the people that accomplish extraordinary things in the world, which there's a version of you that does that, you might be in that state right now, whether it be business, leadership, health, relationships, are rarely the most talented people. In fact, if you read books about successful people, you'll see that they very often tell stories that they had to work harder than everybody else. I mean, my great friend Jim Quick, who's enormously successful, was the boy with the broken brain. He had to actually learn how to learn because he didn't have the skill sets that most of us had. So think about that. They're rarely the most talented. They're simply the ones who learned how to manage their internal environment before the world gets a chance to manage it for them. I talk very often about the game of life, and I have a chapter in my book called Decoding the Game. I like to look at life and gamify it. I don't know about you. It's fun. And one of the things that I can do when I gamify it is be the game player. But sometimes if you wake up in the wrong state and you don't handle your mood management the right way, you might think you're playing the game, but the game ends up playing you. Make sense? Okay, so where are we? Okay. And the people who accomplish extraordinary things know all this stuff. So they're simply the ones who learned how to manage their internal environment. So I want you to think about your internal environment. So this is something that I got from, I'm going to talk about mood management here. And I didn't come up with this idea. I knew the concept of it, but I never called it mood management until I started reading books from Arthur Brooks. Arthur Brooks, fantastic author. He's got a new book coming out, and he's written a fantastic book with Oprah. But it's something, he's a happiness researcher. And what he teaches us extensively is that happiness isn't something that we chase. Think about that for a second. Happiness is not like a destination. It's not like an accomplishment that we chase. It's something that we manage intelligently. So this is about becoming the dominant force and shot caller of your day and managing things intelligently. Now, that doesn't mean that you're stupid if you're not managing things intelligently. It might mean that you just don't know. So what we're going to accomplish today is you're going to know, but what happens next is either you just keep going or you start growing. So Brooks describes happiness as a combination of enjoyment, satisfaction, and meaning. So that's what he equates happiness to. But those things didn't just show up automatically. Okay. We think that they do. This is what's interesting about the human condition and how we wake up in the morning. It's almost as if we learned to wake up at some point and see if it's gonna be a good day. It's like we take our finger and we put it up and we say, is this a good day? Like the day is going to let you know. Well, here's the thing. If you do use that strategy, the day will let you know. States like enjoyment, satisfaction, meaning show up, and then you're going to learn how to regulate your emotional state after they show up. Now, that's a sticky game to play if you think about it. If I wake up in the morning and I make an assessment of the day before I claim control of it, well, what's going to happen is the day's going to look very similar to an element that was worrisome, challenging, or, hard the day before, because your brain boots up like a computer. And when your computer boots up, just like this computer I'm looking at here or this phone, it doesn't boot up anything new. It boots up what you were using last. Your brain works the same way. So in other words, mood management is the foundation of happiness, productivity, and clarity. So let's talk about the Real Productivity Program. I hope you're enjoying this. That was just what crossed my mind right there. So most people try to improve their lives by managing time. I know this because I teach time blocking, and time management is a big, big thing. Get organized, manage your time. So we learn things like that, and there's so many different courses on time blocking, the latest productivity apps, and we make to-do lists and task lists. You know why most people don't have to-do lists in their pocket is because they tried it and they didn't follow through. So there's a lot of great strategies, and there's a lot of great books on strategies. But productivity is not primarily a time management problem, and that's what we're talking about here. It's actually a state management problem because your emotional state is chaotic. Or I'm sorry, not is. If your emotional state is chaotic, overwhelmed, reactive, or drained, everything becomes harder. Am I right? So if my emotional state has those elements. It's chaotic, it's overwhelmed, stressed. I told you before about my struggles with anxiety. It wouldn't go away in the morning, but if my emotional state is like that, the things that we're talking about doing become harder. So doesn't it make sense right now to consider going and working on your emotional state before? So in our Make Sense ecosystem, we always say, hey, great morning, Jennifer Dorothy has joined us. Great morning, everybody. Hope you guys get to meet each other on Substack, on YouTube. Um, so anyway, it gets harder if our emotional state is off. And it's just so fascinating how we just assume that the day will fall into place without taking care of our mood. Isn't that interesting? So even simple tasks begin to feel heavy. You know, decision making becomes harder, creativity becomes harder. Writer's block, by the way, as somebody that writes every day, has a lot to do with my emotional state and my mood. So before I sit down to write, I do some other things that I need to. So, like if exercise, for example, if drinking water and listening to a positive podcast or listening to some music or meditating or exercise gets you in a better emotional state, wouldn't it make sense to do the tasks that will be easier to do, like react to adversity and things like that after you've gotten in the right emotional state? So decision making becomes harder, creativity harder, relationships harder to navigate. Anybody relate to that? And like I said, even the simplest of tasks become difficult. Now, I can tell you honestly, I drove all day yesterday and I didn't sleep last night. And we've also got a lot of challenging personal things going on. We've got a very close friend of the family dying, and we've got some sick parents, and we've got a lot of stuff going on. So my emotional state is already taxed. So I can't afford to go through my sleep habits and my morning routine and rely on those. I wouldn't have made it here today. Now, even though I did everything perfectly and I made it here today, I still have a little bit of that emotional state. But what I can tell you is that we're almost 20 minutes into being together and I feel better. My emotional state is feeling better. So I've figured out something that helps me with my emotional state while I'm in action, and that is speaking to you. And that is recording these podcasts live. Alexi says, I worry my gym won't be gamified and I stop. All right. So let's use that as an example. So Alexei Zaitsev from Substack is saying he worries that his gym is not going to be fun, so he stops. So if that is the case, and that's an interesting way to look at it, then you would need to do something to get rid of that worry before you look at the gym. So I would do something in the morning to get me in a state where I wouldn't look at it that way. I would see it clearly and say, hey, everything points to and proves that the gym is going to make me feel better. And if you go to the gym enough, you'll have proof. You know, anytime I've never walked out of the gym feeling bad, ever. It's like Prozac, right? So have you ever felt like just doing nothing? Isn't that interesting? You know, I just feel like doing nothing today. I need a day off. Those are those simple tasks that sometimes get tough. And that's because your mood directly influences your perception of reality. So when somebody states, I feel like doing nothing today, can you hear in those statements that there's a perception of reality? So if I wake up and I think that the day is dreary and it's going to be a tough day, I might be more prone to saying something like that because my perception of reality is tainted. because I didn't take command of it. So we're entertaining the idea here of getting more enjoyment from not taking a day off of life, but from taking a day on. And I love that idea. I always make a decision in the morning to take a day on. So when you're centered in life, when you're centered and clear, challenges look like opportunities. That's what's interesting about somebody that is kicking ass in life is they will claim that they enjoy the suck. They enjoy the hard things. It's like a joy for them to do it. And that's because things look differently when you're centered and you're clear. So we're talking about getting centered and clear before we do things. It's almost like the challenges in life. And I have this feeling right now. It's a lot of hard things that I have ahead of me today. The challenges in life look like training reps, and they're training reps for building personal growth. So when you're deregulated, though, or dysregulated, those same challenges or even easier ones can feel like threats or impossibilities when you're dysregulated. So we're talking about getting regulated first, which is exactly why in my book, I teach the interface response system and why it becomes so powerful. When we decide to make an assessment of our brain and our thoughts and understand and embrace where all those thoughts came from, our mother, father, teacher, preacher, the programmed and conditioned nature of the brain, that's step one. So when I do that in the morning and I know that all of the thoughts and feelings that I'm having, just like my heart beats, my brain thinks, I don't have to buy into them. I don't have to participate with them and make them my identity. I can just observe them and pause them. Step two of the interface response system. I say, okay, great, got all that, but I'm going to do something. I'm going to go into action right now, and I'm going to decide the way things are going to be. So that's what the interface response system is for and why it's such a powerful thing to learn. If you read my book, once again, and you join our free mastermind on those topics, that stuff's going to become on autopilot. That's a good autopilot to have to allow yourself to dispute and contemplate things. But there's a more important part of all of this. If your internal environment is dysregulated, like I said, and chaotic, I could give you the interface response system. Once again, I could give you a tool and a strategy, but it's going to be much more difficult to run. So back to what you said, Alexi, I could say, here, Alexi, go to the gym. It's going to make you feel better. But if your emotional state is off and it's harder for you to get to the gym, well, now you have to have grit and you have to work harder. And that's difficult for people. But if you can get yourself in the right emotional state and manage your mood prior to looking at that task, it's not going to be harder. So for me to run the interface response system and say, when somebody comes at me or criticizes me or something doesn't go my way, it's easy and it's fun because for me, it looks like training. It looks like building muscle in my life. So your perception gets distorted or even shut down when you're emotionally dysregulated. So your pause capabilities, your ability to say, okay, I hear you, what you're saying, but you're going to put it on pause, cognitively distance yourself from the stimulus that happened and your knee-jerk reaction. Your perception gets distorted or even shut down, and your pause capabilities weaken. Your processing becomes emotional. Think about what that means. If I stop myself and I go, well, what do I actually think? But I'm still emotional about something, and I start to process things, my emotions are going to dictate a lot of what I think. So we got to get that stuff under control. And what happens is it's an interesting thing when you process things from an emotional state. That's why in my relationship with my wife, if one of us is like has heightened emotions about something, we try our best to say, hey, let's table this for another time. I don't think I'm in the right state for this conversation. And we try to respect that decision. If not, what will happen is you can pose something that is perfectly logical and the other person will say something. I call those, they turn into what's called yeah buts. They'll say, yeah, but they'll say, yeah, I hear what you're saying, but. So if you think about it, when you bring your butt into an equation, what's happening? You're emotional. You're emotional in it and you're letting it dictate it. So mood management stabilizes the operating system of the interface response system. It stabilizes the operating system that the interface response system and your whole perception and reaction system runs on. And if you don't do that, that's why you're out there trying so hard to do things and not getting anywhere. So it's the difference between reactively living and intentionally living. So there's essentially two ways that people move through life, and that's you and I. We're either moving through life reactively or intentionally. So reactive living means that your environment determines, I'm sorry, your environment is determining everything. Okay. And there's no intentions in it. That's what reactive living means. It means that you are living in reaction to your environment. You wait for the environment to tell you things. So reactive living is thoughtless, right? And it's thoughtless because you're just letting your operating system do the job. You're handing the keys of trust over to your operating system, which we know is not really ours. It's what we've acquired from experiences in life. That's great, but it's also been programmed and persuaded and conditioned into our minds from our programmers, our mother, father, teacher, preacher. So we can't hand the keys of trust over to that and expect to get a great result. Could be a stressful email that you get that ruins your mood, traffic maybe, a bad comment can ruin your mood and your focus. So your state is constantly being pushed around by circumstances. That's what it means to be, if you're reactively living, you're a victim of circumstances and hoping that the circumstances get better before you get better. Your circumstances change when you change. And that's called intentional living. So intentionally living flips the equation. You decide the emotional baseline that you bring to the day. You decide the emotional baseline. You could say it out loud. And from that centered place, circumstances become things that you respond to versus react. And the difference between reacting and responding is there's a thought process that goes on with logic and rationale in connection with your greatest desires. So circumstances become things that you respond to, not things that control you. Nothing controls you when you decide to respond versus react, because it means that you have a say in it. So that's called mental sovereignty, by the way. So let's talk about the night before rule. Here's where most people miss the entire equation. So let's say you're vibing with this right now and it makes sense. Let's see what we're seeing. We got a lot of stuff from Lori Melton in here. Emotional state can be extremely fluid. Lori says, however, structure is integral for her for a successful day. Your body may need rest. Anxiety takes a toll on your body in her experience. Great stuff, Lori. Great stuff. Okay, so let's get back. We're going to talk about the night before rule. And this is the thing that most people miss. Everyone loves talking about morning routines. Whether you do them or not, that's a big thing. Everybody talks about the morning routine. We meditate, we exercise, we read, we journal, we do cold plunges, all of that stuff. Podcasts, we listen to podcasts, we do podcasts, all of that. Great, great stuff. But remember, who you are determines how well what you do works. But here's the reality. Who you are when you're doing those things, meditating, exercising, journaling, cold plunges, determines how well what you do works. So your morning routine doesn't start in the morning, it starts the night before. Now just sit with that for a second. How could my morning routine start the night before? Now you're starting to load the logic and rationale into your head and you understand why, right? It's because who you are when you wake up for your morning routine determines how well what you do works. So if you stay up late at night, we have something in our house called twilight hour. The hour before we go to bed, no technology, family. We don't let anything in our brains that could affect our sleep. And also remember, we go offline when we sleep, but whatever you go to bed with might wake up with you. So we like to go to bed in the right atmosphere. And we love to just focus on It's a great way to improve your relationships too and spend quality time with one another. But if you stay up scrolling social media, watching stimulating content, eating junk food, that's another big thing, drinking alcohol or substance abuse, or flooding your brain with dopamine, which is what we're all doing without even knowing it, you might feel temporary pleasure. But here's what Arthur Brooks says that you're doing when you do those things at night that you like doing, the scrolling and all of that dopamine stuff. He says that when you do that, you're actually unknowingly borrowing happiness from the next morning. You're borrowing some of the happiness that is available to you the next morning when you do that stuff at night. So the cost shows up the next day in the following way. You might wake up with brain fog, and you think that it's just that day. You might have low motivation, irritability, increased reactivity, wake up on the wrong side of the bed. That started before you went to bed. And I can't tell you how important this is. And just try it, challenge yourself. You didn't just lose sleep. I didn't sleep well last night, but I went to bed the right way. You didn't just lose sleep, you lost clarity when you do those things, patience and emotional stability. And the morning routine matters, but if you don't do a proper, healthy night routine, the morning routine can get washed out. But let's talk about the morning routine. When you wake up in the morning, your brain is still transitioning out of the dream state. There's this little teeny fragile moment where your brain goes from offline to online, and you'll know it. And I always challenge people, one of the greatest things you can do is start from a place of gratitude, because that pauses your program from booting up. So there's that moment where your brain, which mysteriously goes offline and you stop thinking during sleep. You dream, but you're not thinking. You're not consciously there. Okay. Different part of your brain takes over. But when you wake up and your eyes first crack open and you start to boot up your computer, okay, that's called that transitioning state. You're moving from dream state into, I guess we would call this baseline reality. So that's called the hypnopompic window. Hypnopompic window. So your mind is extremely impressionable, just like when you were a little kid listening to your parents during that time when you're just coming offline to online. You are either going to listen to the boot up of your program or you're going to take control of it. And the easiest thing for you to do, and you can start doing this immediately, is just capture that moment and say thank you. And you know what's interesting when you say thank you in the morning to your brain and you're just groggy and you haven't even woken up, your brain will instinctively ask, for what? For what? I do this every morning. I say thank you. And I don't even have a context other than I'm programmed. It's a habit. I say thank you. And my brain says, for what? So you know what I start to do? I start to answer that question, for this, for that, for this, for that, the roof over my head, this comfortable bed, my wife, my children, my health, shower, opportunity, challenges, whatever you want to do. So that's that hypnopompic window. So there's really like 30 to 60 minutes in the morning that, you have to claim control. And that is like basically you setting the tone and programming your nervous system for how you want to interpret reality and function that day. But it begins with that first like 5 seconds. So I see Kalpana, Teddy Gozer is here. Great morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We are coming to the end of the session here, but we will stay for a little Q&A if anybody wants to hang out. So we're talking about the hypnopompic window, and we claim control of it by saying thank you, and we start off from a place of gratitude. And the reason why that's so powerful is anything that's going to boot up if you don't do this is not present. It's from yesterday. It's either a worry about the mysterious future or you're worried about something that you just haven't let go of yet. But if you say thank you and you ask yourself for what, you are in the present. You've unwrapped the present moment. Okay. And that is that first couple of seconds, but you really want to have a routine that claims control in the first 30 to 60 minutes of the day. And I take this very seriously. And it's why I've been doing this for years and years and years now. So in the first, if the first thing that you do is check your emails, socials, and you're not supposed to do this, but sometimes we do this instinctively. If it's the first thing you do is check your social media, your emails, your nervous system enters reaction mode immediately. And what are you going to do if the email and the or you're hoping that it's going to be good, that people like your post and people are viewing you and saying, hey, that's a great post, or the email is, you got the job, well, we're so happy for you, you just won $1 million. Pretty rare that that's what comes through the feed. You're going to get an update on the war in Iran, right? First thing in the morning, you're going to get an email that says you owe a bill, and you're going to see social media about people that are claiming to be perfect and you're not. That's what happens in the morning if we don't claim control. So obviously, stay away from that stuff. Stay away from that stuff. So don't make that the first thing that we do. There's a lot of value in not using your phone or putting it on do not disturb, and only using it for an alarm. But if you're the kind of person that checks it, then you might want to come up with an old school alarm system. If you intentionally set your state through movement, breathing, reflection, or gratitude, that was the thank you, what you do is you begin the day in what I call author mode. That's what I love about writing is it comes from the creative process. It's from me, and then it happens. So I like to look at the boot up of my brain. I like to go into author mode, and that's the difference that changes everything in your life. So let's talk about this in closing, this idea of becoming unfuckwithable in 2026. What a fun goal for 2026, to become unfuckwithable. So the modern world right now, make an assessment, become conscious and aware, arm yourself with the awareness that the modern world is designed right now strategically to hijack our attention and destabilize our mood, to put you in reaction mode so they can lead you somewhere. So you've got that working against you. If you're not taking control of your mood in the morning, it is going to be very, very beneficial for them if you don't take control of your mood, because they're experts at it. And there's, obviously our health is important, and our mindset and everything like that. But one of the most valuable assets that you own today is your attention, and everybody wants it. Everybody wants it. I'm grabbing your attention right now, and I appreciate that, and I'm grateful for it. But make sure that you are filtering where you're putting your attention. I always say, what we consume, we assume. So whatever you're putting your attention to every day actually ends up messing with your intention, doesn't it? So the modern world's designed to hijack your intention and destabilize your mood. That's why there's news cycles, social media, constant notifications. I'm looking at my phone, talking to you on Substack, notifications coming up the whole time. But I've already managed my mood, so I'm ready for it. So if you don't consistently and consciously manage your state, something else will. That's a takeaway for the day. This is why emotional discipline becomes one of the most valuable skills of our time. One of my mentors, Dr. Wayne Anderson, he says the true cause of disease upstream from the upstream is emotional mismanagement. Before all disease, emotional mismanagement. So this is talking about this amazing skill of emotional discipline. It's a muscle that we should work on over time. So the goal is not to avoid adversity, by the way. That's foolish, okay? The goal is to become unfuckwithable by adversity. You want to get to a place where adversity is a fun challenge, just like a kid playing a video game. Whenever they face adversity, they get excited. What if we looked at adversity as opportunities and training to become unfuckwithable? By the way, you cannot become unfuckwithable without adversity. If there's no adversity, there's no training. You cannot build your muscles without any weights in the gym. If it was just an empty room, you cannot build your muscles. Okay? So become unfuckwithable by it. And that means that your center stays intact even when the world becomes chaotic, no matter what. That's what I love about Tal Ben-Shahar's book. It's called Happier No Matter What. And what does that mean to you? I'm going to be happy no matter what. I'm going to work on becoming happier, stronger, more resilient, work on my perseverance and my interface response system, no matter what. That no matter what means bring it, serve it to me on a platter. It's going to make me stronger. So here's the core lesson. Stop trying to control every detail in your schedule. I shouldn't say that in a sense that I'm telling you what to do. Consider stopping or minimizing the idea of trying to control every detail in your schedule. Most of them are out of your control. So start learning how to control your state. Everybody knows that we can't control what happens. We say shit happens. We can only control how we respond. So doesn't it make sense to work on the state but from which that response comes from? The person that is engaging in the schedule, you know, there's a different way to engage in the schedule. If you're engaging in your schedule in a reactive way, then your schedule is dictating you. But if you're dictating your schedule, that's what schedules are for, by the way. You're putting this stuff in there. If the outside world is filling up your schedule, that doesn't work. Okay. Because the person who manages their mood will outperform the person who simply manages their time anytime. Anytime. And you can see this in any work environment or any social environment. It doesn't matter how smart or skilled somebody is, it's the person that has good mood management skills that is going to be the person that you're going to be most interested in, that you'll be able to spot. And they're the ones getting the best results and living their best life. And once you learn to destabilize your internal environment, okay, I'm sorry, not destabilize. Once you learn how to stabilize your internal environment, clarity, remember we said clarity before action, clarity improves, decision making improves, relationships improve. And suddenly, the interface response system that I'm teaching you in my Make Sense book becomes more powerful. Remember, who you are determines how well what you do works. So, what we're saying here is if we work on the who, not only will the do become easier, but you'll get better results from it because who you are determines how well what you do works. So we're talking about working on ourselves first, and the element of maybe a different angle is working on your mood. You do have a say because now you're running it from a place of awareness instead of reaction. So let's face it, at the end of the day, your results are rarely determined by what happens to you. They're rarely determined by what happens to you. They're determined by who shows up to face what happens to you. I love that. I just love that. And that version of you is largely shaped by the way that you manage your mental mood and your mental state. So tonight, instead of asking yourself, what do I need to get done tomorrow when you go to bed and you maybe practice that twilight hour or even just take a baby step, instead of saying, what do I need to get done tomorrow? What you're going to say instead is, who do I want to be tomorrow when I wake up? Who do I want to be tomorrow when I wake up? Because once you answer that question in that way, you can begin building the habits tonight or at night that are going to make the version of you inevitable in the morning. I'm telling you, what's great is you're coming to me in the morning right now, unless you're watching this as a recording or listening to the podcast. This journey, if you want to get started, starts tonight. From wherever you're viewing this, it starts tonight. And when you start doing that, your morning and your success becomes inevitable. And when you master that, life begins to make a lot more sense. So I'll say that one more time for my podcast. And when you master that, life begins to make a lot more sense. So love and appreciate you. I'm going to hang out for a Q&A, but remember, if you learned something today, give it away. That's how it's going to stay. And I hope that everybody has a wonderful and beautiful day. So that's it for the podcast session. But does anybody here that's with us have a question? I see a lot of people. There's people on YouTube and there's people on Substack. Does anybody here have a question or an insight about anything that I just said? Something that you want to learn or something that you do that works for you? I'd love to just see what's going on out there in the world. And obviously, if nobody has anything to say, we won't hang out. But I'll leave the space open. Does anybody have a question or an insight? I know there's a little bit of a delay. Anybody want to check in and say something about this topic? Okay, so Tan Marintz. Tan. Oh, is that you, Tan, from Asia? He says, makes sense. I love that. That's awesome. Makes sense. You know, a lot of people that meet me and, come into the ecosystem and they get the book and podcast or even work with me, they learn about this concept of make sense. Have you ever noticed how many times a day you say make sense? Make sense is something you can ask as a question. You can say make sense, or you can confirm that you understand something and go make sense. Lori says, I keep asking, what is this trying to teach me not to hold on to outcomes? Yeah. Well, I mean, think about it. Outcomes are out of your control, first of all. So as soon as we get attached to an outcome, we're setting ourselves up for failure. We're hoping that it works out, and we can put all the work into leveraging the outcome that we desire, but we don't control it. We can only leverage it. So whenever I find myself attaching to outcomes, which is normal, it's just the way we're programmed, I just always say, interesting. I see that you're attaching yourself to an outcome right now. What do you think about that? Is that a good idea? Oh, that's right. You don't control that. And then you peel it back and you say, what do I control? And remember, this whole idea of mood management, you just keep peeling it back until you get to the first thing that you control. That's what I love about, I control the last hour of my day, and I can control that first moment when I wake up in the morning. So anybody have any questions or comments? Or is that it for today? We've got some great episodes. Any Survivor fans out there? I'm interviewing Savannah Louie, who is a recent winner of Survivor, and she's got this whole betting on yourself talk. So if anybody is a Survivor fan, I used to watch it all the time, but I haven't watched it in a while. But we've got the master of AI, John Lee, coming on the show tomorrow. We've got, we have some great episodes. Tomorrow, you're going to get the episode from Wendy Suzuki. We've got Todd Herman, the alter ego effect. And God, we have some amazing guests come up. And I hope you guys are enjoying the podcast. And also, if you have my book and you've actually started to read it, please, do me a favor and do the world a favor and leave a review. If you go to Amazon and you leave a review for our book, it makes a huge difference. I'm not trying to become the world's most famous author, but I do want my book to get into the hands of others. And there's an algorithm. And when you have people consistently giving reviews, that's how it gets noticed. So if you've got my book and you haven't yet gone to Amazon, scroll down, leave a review, please feel free to do so if you're inclined. Okay, so I don't see anybody on Substack asking any questions. Anybody going once, going twice? Anybody have a question about this topic of the night before rule, mood management, your morning routine, anything like that? All right. Well, you guys have a wonderful day, and I will see you next week. Tune into the Make Sense with Dr. JC podcast. If you want to learn how to start or ramp up or monetize your podcast like I've done from A to Z, consider checking out the Dragonfly Flight Academy. You can just reach out and say, hey, I want to find out about the Flight Academy through any of our channels. We've got our wonderful Make Sense Substack, which is a daily newsletter for the inner circle, the paid subscribers. And then we have our once a week Echoes of newsletter for the free subscription. And we've got our YouTube channel, all of that stuff. So come enjoy and join the Make Sense ecosystem, and stop going through life and start growing through life. Love and appreciate you. Have an amazing day. Bye-bye now.